Oh my gosh, and that was like such a big change and a shift. And I came into that like therapy for autism for that reason. And I think like a lot of people don't really understand masking. And then when I explain, hey, you know how when you're at a work dinner you have to pretend to be this person? Now imagine that 100% of your entire life.
I want to thank you. Thank you for coming on Tackling Minds today. My hope for the show is that if just one episode can help one person get through something challenging in their life right now, this work is worth it. In today's conversation, I hope it is helpful for people in getting to know a little more about neurodivergence. What falls under the umbrella, which ones do you live with, and how do you relate it to your sense of identity? You just did a TED Talk last month, and people can easily Google you. But for those who like hearing from you firsthand, would you please tell us about yourself? What do you want us to know about you?
Oh, that's a really good question. Hi, my name is Vita Henderson Chan. I am a multidisciplinary artist and creative. I'm a musician. I'm a professional creative as well. I run a production company here in Hong Kong. And that's all the boring kind of like CV stuff. What do I want you to know about me as a person? I'm constantly trying to improve myself and learn more and experience life in a new and tactile way. And I like to think that my best qualities are, what are my best qualities? I guess my best quality is my resilience in the face of so many different adversities and different things that have really got me down in my past, and the ability to kind of like get up and be like, do you know what? If other people can get through it, I can get through it. And that's kind of the mentality I take into things. It's like, what could I do to be creative and help people?
So, how did you arrive at this state? You mentioned having, you wanted to embrace life or approach life in a more tactile way. And I find that interesting that you use that word.
So there's been like a couple of things of why I kind of want to be more tactile with life. The first thing was like I am actually now just over 5 years sober, and coming into sobriety and coming into that journey with my like mental health and dealing with the disease of addiction was one of these things which realized I had to be grateful every single day, because there was times in my life before where I wasn't being grateful of the opportunities, of the surroundings, the wonderful people in my life, and I think being really present and being and focusing on doing and experiencing life is actually a joy and a gift, and it's awesome. We should celebrate happiness and celebrate experiences on a day-to-day basis. The second thing is obviously I have a chronic illness, in terms of my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I spent a lot of time not being as mobile and able to do the things that I now do, and I want to be grateful to have that mobility and that ability to do the things I want to do. And the third thing is, I think, like a mental health thing. Like I have, before I was formally diagnosed, and like re-diagnosed, as I would say, like I've gone on this like rediscovery with my neurodiversity, I was really struggling with my mental health. And I think like we don't always acknowledge how severe some of these mental issues can be in stopping us from living our best lives and being really present. And I always felt previously when I was kind of going through these more extreme, like mental, well, it's mental health issues, but for me, like my mental health issues were really kind of attached to not receiving the proper support that I needed to have for my neurodiversity. So it's kind of like I wouldn't say that I have like major depressive disorder or anything like that, but I have anxiety and I have depression, which has been a result of not receiving the proper treatment for my different neurodiversities. And like when I wasn't having the support that I needed and like getting the correct help, like it was just such a horrible place to be in. And I wasn't able to live in the present moment and to experience things and to be grateful to experience things. And now, this part in my journey of my life, I am able to do that. So I like to experience life in a very tactile way and be grateful and be happy and not feel shamed into like hiding my emotions of joy. I think it's such a silly thing that people do, like just not showing how happy and awesome that they feel and just having to sit in a little box. Why sit in a box when you can just be kind of loving it and appearing a little bit bad sometimes?
Why sit in the box when you can be all kinds of things other than a box?
Yeah.
And you can get
There's an
creative in it.
amazing Amy Winehouse quote, which is like, they wanted me to be a little triangle, and I said, no, And I love that.
So you said a lot there, and I guess for anyone who's not really familiar with the term neurodivergent, maybe they are. That's probably why they clicked into the episode. But for anyone who is not, when someone asks you, "Do you?" I heard you talk about neurodivergence in your interview or in your talk. Can you tell me more about it? What would be your like sub 1 minute quick brief?
So I would say I have a variance amongst the range of quote unquote normal. I really like there's a fabulous speaker from Diverse Minds Hong Kong. She's actually a founder of Diverse Minds Hong Kong, Noelle Sinclair, who she in her talk refers to neurodiversity as like akin to biodiversity, in that we need all different kinds of minds to make the world work. And I like to think of, for me myself, like recently and reflecting back on that, I think that's a really good way. I have a slightly different kind of mind to the neurotypical archetype, but it helps to make the world go around, or at least I like to think.
Whoever's doing work in educating people, not just in a textbook manner, because let's face it, that's pretty boring. Prior to interacting with other people who had been honest with me about ADHD and autism, I didn't know much about ADHD. It wasn't until I tried to get to know that person and tried to read more about ADHD that I realized, why does this sound like me? It's one of those things like, oh, snap. Okay, now I'm truly interested. But I'm not trying to attach myself to, say, something that falls under the category of disorder. I'm not trying to do that. Just trying to understand more and understand better. So, in your, I hate to use the word journey, but I guess in your process of trying to figure out maybe what's behind your self talk, what's behind your narratives in the past that might not have been as healthy as today, can you talk us through that process? How deep were you in that state until you decided to, you know what, this has to change?
So there's kind of a few different parts to this story. I was diagnosed with autism when I was actually fairly young, especially for a signed female at birth person. I got my diagnosis when I was 11, and then it was kind of, you're just a little bit autistic, so it's not going to really be an issue. You're going to have some social communication things, the way you process, blah, blah, blah. And was kind of ignored. And then I started having a lot of different like mental health problems as a teenager, which were clearly related to the autism, but no one seemed to like figure that out. And then it was like lots of different medications and things. And I kind of just thought it's a misdiagnosis, it's wrong, I must have something else. Then when I came into like my treatment center for like rehab, my key worker was just like, "You're clearly autistic. Like there are so many things here that line up with autism more so than like a potential diagnosis than bipolar." And it was kind of like in the beginning of my recovery, it was kind of taken more in like seriously and like helped in like my treatment and like care plan. But it wasn't until I actually like went to see a therapist who had autism herself, and I started talking about things and saying, these are the things I'm really struggling with. These are these things. I'm on all these medications. Like I'm struggling and like I don't think I'm depressed. I'm not entirely sure. And we worked through a lot of things together and basically found out that a lot of the kind of anxiety things were coming from masking because the way I interacted with people for the majority of my life was that I was trying to mirror and trying to be like a version of the person they wanted me to interact with. I wanted to be better in social situations. I knew that I wasn't the best in social situations. And instead of thinking, well, here's maybe a playbook of something I can take, say 20, 30% from and kind of freestyle the rest, it'd be like, this person needs me to say this, this, this. I need to do this, this, this. It becomes kind of like a flow chart of how do I interact with each person. And I get extremely overwhelmed. I get so burnt out with social communications. And like I would have previously described myself as a really struggling extrovert, and I just push myself and push myself and push myself to be good with groups of people. And like now I don't mask as much, or like I spend a lot of time unmasking, and it is a big energy, like I don't want to say an energy relief, but like it takes up a lot less of my energy to interact with people because I'm not constantly going, and if so and so does this, I need to do this, and I need to do this, and I need to do this, and then I need to do this, and this happens in this situation. Blah, blah. The other thing is when you're masking like that and you're trying to do this flow chart of how to work out humanity, you are going to get really, really, really wrong sometimes and end up in bad situations, and you just completely freak out. The other thing that happened is, so I started seeing that therapist for a bit. She unfortunately she stopped being able to see me. She was having some personal things going on in her life, and I started seeing another therapist who had ADHD and autism. And really, really quickly, she kind of reflected back to me that she thought it'd be really beneficial if I went to see a psychiatrist that could give me a screening for ADHD. And I, at this time, was dating, it was in a long distance relationship thing with a guy who had ADHD. And I was like, I do not have what he has. There's no way I have it. Like, he, like, it's like, he just forgets things. He's like all this, and like, he's a really nice guy. I don't want to feel like I'm insulting him, but I was just like, there's no way I could have ADHD. No, I've seen ADHD in person. I don't have that.
In your experience at dealing with different people, be it friends, be it peers, or just, casual encounters, well, including romantic relationships, and that whole lot, what has come up in like key differences that you notice how you did things versus how other people did things, whether they are considered allistic or whether they also share some form of neurodivergence?
I would say in like my coping mechanisms, I really think in blocks. I think in this task is this block, this task is this block, this task is this block. I can move the blocks around, I can add in more blocks. But if I'm doing something and someone's like, "Oh, hey, could you just do this?" It's like, no, I can't. The change in the plans or the change in the routines, if I've planned to do something, it I think for someone who doesn't have this same or similar kind of neurodiversity that I have, it's quite easy for them to be more flexible with things. But for me, it can feel like the absolute end of the world if the plan changes or something goes wrong. So recently on this like trip I did, I was doing some work and there was some extra things added to the brief and I had to manage things and change things around and I thought I could do that. And then there was some additional changes that kind of came in like last minute. And it really, really, really threw me. The team I was working with could just tell like I was really, really, really stressed out. I was really on the edge. My anxiety was like holding my body, like shaking, like not feeling good about it. And it was really, really obvious. And that's because because it was so last minute, it was like trying to move these blocks in my head going, but this block doesn't fit, and this block doesn't fit, and this block doesn't fit. And I actually got really, really sick. I was physically unwell. The day I came back, I was just like wrote off that entire day. Um, and that is a completely normal reaction for me of when things get too much and there is too many like unknown variables and changes that I can't control. I react really intensely.
And on top of that, you also have to juggle masking. You mentioned that you've been in the process of unmasking, but I imagine that that's not like a flip switch kind of process. This is not an overnight process, or is it for you?
It's not, it's been like 2.5 years, I would say, that I've been unmasking, maybe a little bit longer. I would say like 2020 was the year that I really, really, really started unmasking. So I guess it's been like 3 years. I would say that most people, whether neurodiverse or neurotypical, have some element of masking in different scenarios and situations. I don't like thinking, I feel like autistic individuals may mask a lot more than other people, and then there may be more severe masking, but we all have to put on this. I am this persona at work. I am this persona when I go and perform. I am this persona. It's just to the different extremities. And I think like a lot of people don't really understand masking. And then when I explain, hey, you know how when you're at a work dinner, you have to pretend to be this person? Now imagine that 100% of your entire life. And I think that makes it quite easy for people to understand, oh, wow, that must be exhausting. One of my best friends, she said to me, like, we all thought you were weird before. Like, just be weird and not so exhausted. Like, you don't, when you're masking, you think you're doing such a good job, and the reality is you're not. Like, not all the time. Sometimes you're doing an okay job, but like, it's kind of like you're okay if someone interacts with you for less than 20 minutes, and then after 20 minutes, it's like you're kind of a robot. There's something like not quite right with you.
But what your friend said, that sounds like acceptance. I mean, how did that make you feel when someone had said something? Hey, in essence, just be yourself. I just don't want you to be exhausted. Don't want you to be tired.
Oh, I love my friends. My friends are so, so, so supportive. Whatever I do within reason, as long as it's not illegal, my friends will be like behind me being like, "Come, Vita, you do it, do this project, like you can do it. We believe in you, you're so good." And it's just really nice to be surrounded by just really amazing, supportive individuals. So I'm very, very lucky. A lot of my friends are also neurodiverse, which I find
I
quite
was going to ask
funny.
because the stereotype here, or what people might assume, especially when you were diagnosed at such a young age, and that's probably something that went around, like teachers knew, or some classmates knew, some other parents knew. So, how is that for you making friends and keeping friends
I did
over
not have friends in
time?
school. I did not have friends in school. Um, I was weirder and smarter and much, 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 much louder and probably actually like the same level of hyperactive. Like I'm pretty hyperactive now. I'm one of these people that like jumps up in the morning and is performing until 2 a.m. and doing a million different things. Just like
Well, you are wearing like
like
50 hats, so I can imagine so.
so many different things. But I was so weird. I was such a weird kid. Like I feel like I'm a quirky adult, but like having this personality as a 13-year-old and just being really, really, really into classical music and like Baroque music and playing the organ. No, I did not have friends. I had one friend, shout out to Sophia, who recently was like she messaged me like maybe like a year ago being like, I think I'm neurodiverse. And I was like, knew it. But yeah, no, I just did not the the other children were just like, nope, not you. But I was kind of okay with it. I was happy to read books and play piano and be far, far away from like other teenagers. When I, became an adult at like 18, I was hanging, even like before I was 18, I was hanging out with like adults and cool people and who were doing cool things. And it was so much easier to talk to them about like, because a lot of people, if you talk about something that you're really, really, really passionate in, and something that you're creating and something that's kind of amalgamation of different cultural references that you're doing, they actually think, wow, that's really cool. I'd like to learn more about it. And I think as you get a little bit older, this kind of like facade of, oh, I've got to be with the cool kids kind of goes away. And you're just like, nah, that's cool. Tell me more about your musical cabaret Edgar Allan Poe, like 80s disco mashup. And it's like, well, cool. Let me talk about it. And like, you just make friends with awesome people who want to do awesome things. And my friendship group really reflects that now. I have people who are, within my age range to people who are in their 60s, who are my friends, 60s and 70s, like whole range of ages. And it's awesome. And no one is judging each other based on what do we like, what do we don't like. I actually have friends, I say like around my age, I have friends who are like in their late teenage years who are jazz musicians who are just super, super talented musicians who like to play music and hang. It's awesome.
That
Mm.
sounds like you got really lucky there. Now, I imagine not a lot of people get the opportunity to make friends, especially if they feel hindered. For friendships or relationships, or even within family relationships, where in the family it's mostly holistic and maybe heavier on the neurodivergent side, whether it's ADHD, whether it's autism, whether it's something else. How can we help the holistic ones understand this one person that they care so much about, but have no idea just how to connect with them, how to maintain intimacy or even build intimacy with them?
It's so easy to connect with someone who's neurodiverse. This is my,
Yeah,
my whole
that
thing.
easy?
It's so easy. Just be like, what do you like? Tell me about it. Because if someone's like, what do you like? Tell me about it. I can like talk for like hours about the things that I like and just be like, this is the thing I like. I like this thing. I like this thing. I like this thing. I'm just full of information. And I feel like there's this fallacy that neurodiverse communication is somehow strange and obscure and weird, and neurotypical communication is straightforward. No, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Neurotypical communication makes absolutely no sense. Like people will come up to me being like, "I can't believe you said that." I'm like, "Well, what did I say?" I said, "You said that you didn't like that piece of art. It's so bitchy." It was like, "No, I said I didn't like that piece of art. I don't like that piece of art for this reason. I don't say that I have anything morally against the artist or whatever she's doing. I don't like this particular. How dare you?" And it's like you're putting words into my words that don't exist there. I'm saying I do not like that piece of art. It doesn't mean I think that the artist is terrible. It doesn't mean I don't think the artist is talented. I personally do not like that piece of art. That's it. Or like when you say to someone, I don't think it's gonna work out between us romantically, like I'm not interested in you, and they're like pushing back. It's like, well, I've just said that. Like, I don't think it's gonna work out, but like, why are you pushing back? There's not some like secret message. I just say exactly what I think all the time, and sometimes that gets me into trouble, but like most of the time, it's pretty easy to communicate with me because I'm just saying pretty much exactly what I'm thinking all the time. There's no like big secret. There's no like projected meaning. There's no like my brain is not nuanced enough to add in additional meaning to the words I've said. I'm just very straightforward.
I asked you that question not because I don't know, but because I'm very curious about someone else's experience. For example, in my past relationships, when I've been asked before, but why did you do that? I'm like, I told you why I did it. Well, what? Well, I thought you meant this one. No, when I say blue, I mean blue. I totally get what you mean. So you know what? I'm glad I'm not alone. And whoever's out there right now who experienced this before or experiencing this right now, you're not alone. I have my take on like how can we be more determined and straightforward with people who just don't seem to believe us when we say this is exactly what I said, this is exactly what I mean. I don't mean anything else. There's no between the lines. How do you convey that?
The personal experiences, I at a certain point, I just have to say there is too much energy being exerted. This is the way that I communicate. You obviously don't communicate in this way. You should be friends with someone else. Like we should not be friends. Like I have no ill will against you, but it's just not fundamentally going to work out. We do not speak the same language. And like I've had to like lose friends and some people who are like, I'm neurodiverse, I'm this and this, and then you get into these situations with them and just like, great, you have a very different way of communicating than I do. I am trying very, very, very hard to understand the way that you communicate, but it's not going in. No ill will, but please leave my life. Please. Because it's just not going to work out. And people get really, really, really upset when you do that. And it's like, I don't hate you. There's nothing bad. It's just, this is such an unnecessary, like, loop to be in of just like, we're having these arguments all about communication because you want to, like, add in extra meaning to the words that I'm saying. And I just say exactly what I mean. And you think I'm being blunt or rude. My friends actually, like, uh, understand and know. Like I'd send like very, very direct texts and people being like, "Oh, you're stressed out." I'm like, "Yeah." It's like because there's a certain point in my communication skills where it just breaks down. I'll go from like lots of emojis and smiley faces and trying very hard, and then I'll go to like just directions as if I'm like, yeah, I'm a director, so like it does get to a point where it's just like, but this. And like my friend called me the other day, he was like, "You're really stressed out, aren't you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm fine, I'm fine." And he's like, "No, no, no, just read back what you said. It's just like bullet points with like numbers and a list of directions." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I am very stressed out. I'm sorry. My like capacity to like understand and speak in words is gone, so like bear with me." But like my friends just get it now. And then I'll even send like a disclaimer text that's like, "I am very busy. Like the politeness and the emojis have gone. They will return tomorrow. Sorry, my brain is turned into music or art. Like it's all scrambled." And most people are like, "Yeah, I guess that." But if like the first time it happens to someone, they're like, "Wow, you're being called bitch," and I'm like, "Ah." And this is the thing about masking is like you said, like what we're doing to an extent. Like I actually do want to communicate with my friends in ways that's like sending emojis and being nice and like doing that, but like there's a certain point of functioning where it just goes like like do you know what I mean? I think you know what I mean with like the ADHD you must also have this. It's just like it just becomes like do this, 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 do this. I'm out.
You know what? What you just shared right there, I think that is helpful already because we're talking about communication there. And I don't think that is somewhat exclusive to the neurodivergent community, whether you're neurodivergent or not. I think that applies to just about everyone who face struggles with communication. And you know what? That's everyone. No one is perfect. No one is a perfect communicator here. And what you did there was you were being honest and blunt about, well, not honest and blunt, they don't need to be tied together, but you were honest about, look, when I'm stressed, this is what happens. So you give people a bit of like expectations on how they can manage expectations as well, especially with anyone who have perhaps previous negative experiences with someone else
Mm,
where they get triggered when they receive certain types of communication styles. It's not necessarily pertaining to, let's say, you or me, but it's more like what they remember in their past, and it's triggering for them. So they're just
yeah.
reacting out of those triggers.
I think this is one thing that like my therapist has really, really helped me with is like I previously, when before this was pointed out to me, like saying that people get upset because the communication changes so abruptly. So you must send them a message to let them know why the communication has changed, that you still do care about them, but this is what's going on. And most people will have space to kind of go, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, okay, cool. Like I'll give you some space around it. But if you don't tell them and it goes from one extreme to another, it makes you seem like you've just turned into a very cold person and people can project meaning onto that. And like, regardless what the intention was, if the person is feeling that way, like you've got to take accountability and go, what can I do better next time? There's like one solution that I've done to this, which is potentially the most stereotypically autistic thing I could have done. But I got ChatGPT to write me my I'm busy message and like I value your communication. I was just like, I can't be bothered to communicate this. And people are like, wow, what a lovely message. I'm like, it was written by I'm so sorry.
Just reminds you of the South Park episode. If you haven't watched it yet, you gotta watch it.
I was just like sitting there being like, this is like absolute meta autism. And I was just like, Vita, you must be stopped. But when I have run out of words, ChatGPT and other technological tools can be used to help me.
I mean, all of this comes from a place of love. You obviously also had to go through a process of developing that appreciation and love for yourself to even go through the process of unmasking. Because even that process of change, that takes effort. Whether we're dealing with neurodivergence or not, it's just humanely speaking, when we tell ourselves to stop doing what you've done for so long, for whatever reason that is, that requires effort, that requires energy, that requires some form of mental process. What was that aha moment for you?
Just how stressed I was getting. Like when I started unmasking, it was really kind of like in COVID, and I think COVID really taught a lot of people. Like I think everyone kind of learned some form of lesson or some kind of growth experience during COVID. There was like a big personal realization or rationalization, and my rationalization was that I cannot control things. The concept of control is ridiculous because I am not able to control what's happening in terms of the laws in different countries and mask wearing and like specifically like my job there was lots of things about like how many people are allowed in a space at one time. I can't control the laws on live music. I can't control, when there was going to be like flight restrictions lifted and everything. And I kept making plans that were conditional on things that could potentially happen. And then when the things that could potentially happen didn't happen, I'd get very, very upset. And it was just this kind of like loop. I realized like that was because I'm like so obsessed with plans and routines that it's like I had to like find someone to work on this with. And like I tried working with therapists who didn't have autism, and she was a great therapist for many other different things, but for me, she was not the right person because she didn't understand how ingrained and like how soothing the act of planning something and having a routine was. So I found a therapist who had autism, and there was just like this click where she just started saying things where I was like, "You get it? Oh my gosh!" And that was like such a big change and a shift. And I came into that like therapy for autism for that reason. And she was someone who was like, let's try unmasking, let's talk about masking, let's like look at what are the behaviors of why do you do this. And it came down to this thing that was like I'm still like a really hurt little child that was like nobody likes me, I'm too weird, I've got all of these problems with me, and I have to pretend to be this kind of person because I don't fit in. And it was just like being able to remove that and being like, is that actually something that's going on? Or is that a narrative that I've been holding on to since childhood and projecting onto every single situation since then? I see it a lot in my autistic AFAB friends where it's like, I'm too weird to have a boyfriend and girls don't like me and all these things. And it's these narratives which we have learned as children and they were very, very, I'm not trying to say that like these weren't real experiences that we experienced. They were very real experiences. as children. But as adults, it's like, is this thing actually happening? No. Like in my case, no. I'm sure in other people's cases, there's different degrees of is this thing actually happening. But for my case, it wasn't happening. But I was projecting the same experiences that I was having in my childhood onto every experience that I was like, every woman I met was like, well, she wouldn't like me because the girls didn't like me when I was growing up. Like, and it's just absolute like nonsense. But we're so holding on to these things and like cannot let go of like what's happened in our past. And then when we begin to let go and realize that maybe people have more compassion and maybe people are going to understand neurodiversity, whether it's autism, whether it's ADHD, whether it's Tourette's, whatever it is, if you explain it and communicate and honor people and honor people and respect people to think that maybe people are capable of loving you and being interested in you and finding you cool and fun and like valuing what you do. And that was the thing is like when I was going in my masking, I was just assuming that there was something wrong with me and there was something right with everybody else. And what everybody else was doing was right and I need to fit in. And actually, like, there's no such thing as everybody else. Like, everyone's different. And sure, there's neurotypical and neurodiverse, and some people like to like separate whatever. It's just different ways of thinking. It's not that one's right and one's wrong. It's just different. And like even in neurotypicals, there's like a wide range of how people think and interact with the world. If we can tell each other how we communicate and people can be receptive to that, like I have neurotypical friends who understand some things are going to go over my head and go, shouldn't say that to Vita, should do it this way. And then, when I'm being like really direct and blunt, I go, oh shit, like so and so's neurotypical and I'm really busy. I just send them the message. Done. Like that's it. We don't need to like make all these excuses or like say these people are bad and these people are good. It's just like we just need to work out how to communicate with each other. And if we can't communicate, if there's so much like animosity or like drama happening, just going, cool, can't communicate with you. Find someone else to be friends with. Done. Drama ended.
We can stop taking things so personally. I mean, let's take dogs for example. I'm not obviously comparing this. I just have a dog and right now we're going through puppy training school and assistant dog training school. So it's half of my brain is consumed by all this stuff. We're taught that different dogs have different personalities. Obviously, if this
Hmm.
dog is not food motivated, you're not going to be using food to motivate and teach this dog. You'll probably be using something else, whatever it is, whatever their love language is, whatever their preferred language is, however they interpret and receive information. Now, if we can borrow the same concept to humans, it's not to say that the way you communicate is largely like your identity and that's how you communicate with everybody. If you speak
Yeah.
English to everybody and you go around the world to places where people don't speak English, you're not going to get anywhere. What I'm hearing you say is if we could just dial back on the labels and use labels as a tool that's helpful in terms of identifying, this is how she would be receiving this information best, or this is how he would receive information best. Ultimately, we all want to be happy. We all want to conserve our energy. We want to walk away smiling and not necessarily tap into anger, fear, frustration. If
A
that is
hundred percent.
collective objective and goal, why not? We're nearing the
Okay.
end of this episode. What are you tackling right now?
My current big thing I'm tackling is like scheduling. So I kind of assume that I can do too much, and I forget that I'm human. Which it sounds like a terrible. It is
You mean
pretty.
you're not a unicorn?
I'm not
Because
a
you do
unicorn.
everything.
No, it's just like I sometimes forget that I need to take breaks. So like I was in Bali, I was on a production, making some content. Shout out to the aficionado. We did some awesome video production days. Took a lot of awesome footage that's being turned into kind of promotional film, social media material. Really, really cool stuff. And like got to shoot in loads of awesome venues in Jakarta and Bali. Um, but then jumping back, I booked like I think I've had 4 or 5 gigs since I've been back. I've only been back for a few days. There was one day I had 3 gigs, and just being like, I can do this, 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 and actually realizing, yeah, no, I need to have a bit more break. It's not that I can't do everything. I can do everything I want to do. I just need to be more realistic in the time frames I'm doing things in. One of the things about thinking in blocks is I'm like In theory, someone can do this. I've worked out how you would be able to do it. But then I actually forget I am not a machine or a group of people. I am one person and I am fallible and I have to rest and take breaks and sleep. Just kind of assume I'm a machine. If I'm not stopped, I will just kind of smash my way through things. At the moment, like I'm a musician, I'm also doing a lot of the public speaking and awareness and advocacy. I'm doing this amazing podcast with Moy Thomas called Are We Functioning Highly, which is awesome. I'm curating art shows, I'm doing digital art, I'm doing different things within Web3, I'm doing the branding, I'm doing film production, and it's just like after one after another. And, lots of different accessible luxury brands that I'm working with at the moment and doing the like social media content and the different forms of production. And then there's branding projects and then there's website projects. Yeah, in theory, like someone should be able to do this. But in actuality, if you take into consideration that that person is a human, it can be extremely exhausting. In theory, I should be able to jump between all of these things, but in actuality, my brain needs a little bit of a time to adjust. And that's been the thing that I'm struggling with is how do I work out? Actually, that's such a
How do you
that's
be
an answer.
human?
How do I
How to
work out how to
manage
be a human?
how to manage his brain who is like full on AI android but dealing with a human body.
Yes, I love that Janelle Monáe album actually. Her whole like whole thing about androids. I love her. She's amazing. But yeah, so that's the thing is like remembering that I'm human and staying really focused in being kind to myself and not pushing myself too hard.
When we tackle things, usually, hopefully, what's helpful is if we have something, a reminder, or maybe a mantra or a quote, that's something that anchors us, something that brings you back into the moment of, hang on, health is important to me. What is that phrase for you that brings you back into that moment of prioritizing your needs?
You are who you are, and who you are is enough. I love that one. What's your mantra?
Recently, this float back into my life. I have no idea why I forgot it or stopped thinking about it. And that is get busy living or get busy dying. It's a quote from Shawshank Redemption. Thanks to my dear friend Fraser Quelch, who brought it to my attention a few years ago. Vita, we've come to the end of this episode, and we are going to be recording another episode where we dive deeper into the chronic disease that you are also tackling and battling for majority and if not most of your life. So thank you, Vita, for today. I appreciate everything that you're doing.
Guys, thank you so much, Emily, for being a wonderful host.